Hello and welcome to Builders, the podcast where we explore how the most forward-thinking tech leaders build great teams, products, and companies. I'm your host, Lee Haynes, and today I'm joined by Oliver Spragg, until recently the Chief Technology Officer at Plan A, a climate action platform helping companies decarbonize and stay compliant through powerful data and tech solutions. Oliver brings a sharp lens to how we think about team performance, measurement, and leadership in fast-growing organizations. And in today's episode, we'll dig into exactly how that plays out at scale. Oliver, a warm welcome to Builders. Great to have you with us. How's it going?
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. Yes, it's great. The weather's great. The sun is shining, so it's really nice. Thanks for having me on board.
Thank you for joining. And yeah, you're in Berlin, right?
Yeah, based in Berlin.
Cool. Well, let's start with your background. What's the journey that led you into technology leadership, to Plan A before, and also to current work that you're doing? I know that you're advising for some companies as well, right?
Yeah. So I must say I've had a winding journey. It's been I've done a lot of different things, and so I was always technical. I've always been very technical. I always loved building things. And I actually trained as an electrical engineer in the UK. I started building electronics and kind of low-level hardware pretty early on, kind of as an outcome of what I studied. And then my first jobs, I was doing a lot of kind of very, very low-level hardware programming in C and assembly and building these kind of electrical devices. My first job was with a wind turbine company in London, which was a very kind of informative first step, and I had a great time working there. And then gradually kind of moved up the stack from this very low level into web development, later data and machine learning. And then, more recently spent some time in the crypto space, which was super interesting. It's an amazing industry. And then after some time working in the crypto space, realized I actually wanted to get back to my roots in sustainability. And in around, I think it's towards the end of 2020, joined Plan A as the CTO at a very early stage. So we were about seven full-time employees, perhaps a bit more. And in engineering, two engineers. Over the past four or 5 years, built the company to just over 130 employees, and 32 in the engineering organization. Actually just have recently left Plan A, and now I'm taking some time up. So that's in a nutshell kind of what I've been up to.
Nice. And we'll get on to kind of future plans, I think, towards the latter end of the episode. But also I'd like to talk a little bit about kind of tech for impact and building with purpose, because obviously Plan A is kind of focused on sustainability, like you were talking about. And to kind of zoom in on your time at Plan A, then you were leading tech at this company, and that company's entire mission, correct me if I'm wrong, revolves around climate action, helping businesses decarbonize and stay compliant through data and software, right? So I mean, this is not just a tech challenge; it's a societal one.
This was actually something I found really, really cool about what we were doing. So I didn't found Plan A. Plan A was founded, I think it was 1 or 2 years before I actually joined. And they started, and they have Lou, the CEO, is super charismatic. She actually started the company, not because she wanted to build software necessarily, or because she wanted to build a kind of really, really successful company, but because she just wanted to do something in the climate space. She saw this huge problem, and she felt really, really motivated to do something to address it. And they started by doing all sorts of different things. They did cocktail evenings, they did film nights, they did meetups, anything they could to kind of raise awareness of the problem. And pretty early on, they realized actually that the biggest part of that problem is businesses. So businesses are the biggest contributors to the problem of climate change. And realized that they needed to find ways of educating businesses and helping businesses to reduce their emissions. And the obvious way to do that is with software. I just thought it was very, very cool. And there's a big reason why I joined was that they although there was this huge business opportunity, there was some really cool software to build there. They were always, they still are, very deeply driven by this need to really solve this problem around climate change, and this is still core to their philosophy. And I think this is a really cool thing. So, like you said, there's a lot going on in the space. There's a lot of really interesting challenges around how you process data, how you collect data from different parts of a very large organization. But at the core of what they're doing, they still are addressing this problem of climate change. And I think that's I think that's common actually with a lot of climate tech companies. And yeah, it's a really important thing and a really cool thing. It's really cool to work in a company that has that kind of vision.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of building. Obviously, it's building, helping companies with sustainability in mind, but like
Yeah.
building for this kind of ESG, right?
Yeah.
All under the umbrella term of sustainability, and also compliance is pretty complex. I can only imagine, right? Regulations vary, data can be messy, and the stakes are really high for many of the businesses involved. So how did your team approach like data infrastructure and product design to kind of support both
Yeah.
regulatory accuracy, business usability, and more?
Yeah, super interesting. So, I mean, I guess the first thing to say is that when I joined, we were very small. We were really still figuring out kind of who our customers were, what was the product that we were trying to sell. And we had this, as I said, we had this kind of philosophical drive, this vision to solve climate change. And what we realized pretty early was that actually, first of all, we were trying to sell to startups. Startups don't need carbon counting software. Their emissions are very small. They have other problems. And the companies that really needed our software were enterprise, large companies in enterprise, so scale ups in enterprise. These are the companies that have large emissions, so they're worth talking to. But for us, as part of our vision, they also have regulatory pressure. They have pressure from their customers, and so we kind of pretty early on kind of started focusing really on larger organizations. And the challenge large organizations have are that they are big, they have lots of different business units, they use lots of different services, their business operations are very complex. And just collecting the data from across this kind of potentially really large organization, one of our main clients is BMW, collecting data from across BMW to be able to calculate your emissions is a huge challenge. Because that data is all over the place. It's very badly structured, or not well structured. It's very dirty. Sometimes you have a lot of duplicates of data, and it became clear that we were not a climate change company. Actually, we're a data company, and in the end, it all comes down to the data and how you're able to ingest data in a flexible way, how you're able to process that data, and then because you're helping them to do reporting. How you make sure that you are able to be audited, that the reports that you're giving your customers are actually accurate. We had cases where we had customers whose management bonuses, for example, were based on success criteria with a sustainability in departments, and so the data that our platform reported had a really tangible impact on people within the company, not just the company itself. So in short, Plan A is really a data company, and making sure that the data is accurate, making sure that you're actually able to process the quantity of data that your customers have is really important. We had cases where, for example, we'd have like an enterprise who buys a lot of stuff, material or products, and you might have gigabytes of data on things that people have bought. So how did we address this? I mean, we needed one thing we figured out pretty early on is that we need to have really, really solid testing in place. So quality is super important. It's the most important thing is you get the numbers right, and so being sure that if you ship if you're shipping rapidly, you're not breaking your numbers. This is super important. Also making sure that the way that you're processing data is flexible and that you're able to add new calculations, for example, very easily. So it was, really, we had like millions of challenges there, and it was super interesting figuring out which were the most important ones, prioritizing those, and finding ways to solve them. Yeah.
Yeah. And for other tech leaders and like working at similarly mission driven companies like Plan A has been, what advice would you give on building scalable systems that
Yeah.
enable this kind of purpose or stay true to that purpose?
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I would say the first thing I say, and I think this is really so important. I realize this is really important for us at Plan A, was that if you're building a purpose-driven company, you're really, really lucky. This is you've ticked a big box that a lot of the other companies really struggle to tick, because it makes it much easier for you to hire and hire good, talented and driven people. I did a lot of hiring at Plan A, and one of the things that I would often ask in the later stages in the management interview would be, what do you want? What are you looking for? I'd be interested in understanding, what that candidate wants, where they see themselves going in their career, and how they want to progress, and what kind of teams they want to work in. And so there's quite a broad question, what do you want? But something like 60 or 70% of candidates would say, I want to do something that's meaningful. I have this amazing skill, and I'm able to build things, which is so cool to be able to build things, and I want to put it to some good. And yeah, I walked out of so many interviews thinking, wow, I'm so lucky to be working at least for a company that people perceive to be doing good, and even more lucky to be working for a company that actually is doing good. And yeah, so I think that's really the most important thing is, if you're working for a mission-driven company, leverage that, and if you leverage that, you have a really strong basis to build a team. I think the other side of that is not losing sight of your purpose when things get tough, or when you start optimizing for other things. And I think that's also a challenge. You on the one hand, you're purpose driven, you have a strong vision, you're doing good in the world. But then on the other hand, you're a business, right? You're not a non-profit. You in the end, you need to generate revenue, and you have customers, and those customers' needs may not always be those first order customer needs may not always be perfectly aligned with your long-term vision. And I think that would be the other side of this, is being able to kind of manage your day to day, and being able to manage your goals, and keep everyone motivated on a quarterly and maybe a yearly basis, and at the same time keeping true to the vision that you've sold. Because when you're hiring someone, and you sell this kind of grand vision of saving the world, you actually made a commitment there, and you need to make sure you keep that, and you're consistent in the way you sell that, and you plan for that in the long term.
And I think it's not to kind of make it sound so much simpler than it really is in practice, but I think a lot of it's becoming far simpler in the sense that I think even a lot of investors in companies nowadays are it's part of their criteria when they're looking to invest, right? Are they working on sustainability matters, or how are they, for example? Or this is only becoming kind of more and more in a part of company strategies. So I think,
yeah. I mean, I think it's very valuable. And as I said, if you don't have a vision, it's just hard to. If you don't have a long-term vision that people buy into, it is just hard to hire and retain really, really good talent in the long term. People are driven by interesting and valuable problems in the end. And I think that's also on a much kind of lower level as well, in terms of how you set objectives in a business, on, for example, a quarterly basis. how you even set objectives on a sprint level. If you're using sprints, if you're planning every 2 weeks, the best way to motivate a team is by setting really tangible goals that people can see that if they hit those goals, they're actually creating value for someone. There's someone at the other end, because a human at the other end whose life is going to be made tangibly easier if they deliver on this thing. Yeah.
Yep. No, I agree. And it leads us well, a nice segue into the next kind of topic, and that's about performance, high performance, and defining that. Like, how do you personally define a high performing team?
Yeah, I think it's honestly, I think it's a really hard thing to define, and my thinking about it has changed a lot as I work with teams. I think my perspective now, and this might change in the future, but my perspective now is overall is a team, or is a part of the business delivering value to the customer. And I think if a team is delivering value to the customer, then they're high performing. Then the next question is like, how fast are they delivering value to the customer, and what's normal here? What should you expect from a team? This is the question that comes up a lot. I think, at least in my experience, between people on the commercial side and people on engineering product side, I've been asked frequently, by someone on the commercial side, what should we expect in terms of the speed at which a team is delivering? What is good? What is the industry standard? And I think that's a really hard thing to really define. I think there are really good leading indicators here. So I think there are things that you need as a foundation for a high performing team. If you don't have that foundation, I think it's very hard to build on top of that and optimize. And I think that the kind of key things there are really around culture. So does a team have a sense of ownership? Does a team have a sense of psychological safety? Is there an openness and a transparency? Do they collaborate well? Do they communicate well? And also how well do they plan? Because there are some basic kind of needs in terms of the quality of the planning. If you're always planning too much for a team and then never able to achieve that, it can be very demoralizing. So I think there are these kind of foundational things that form a foundation for a high performing team, and I think if you have those, then you're in a really good place really good position to then start really delivering value to the customer. And I think there are then things that you can optimize on top of that. So I would call these leading indicators. I would call these like qualitative leading indicators, and I think you can measure them to some extent. But yeah, I would say that's kind of the foundation.
And I think it's a really interesting point, because depending what and where you read, of course, but I mean, I've been looking up a lot of different places where I've seen how top performing like software teams often prioritize points that you're talking about: the clear ownership, the culture of learning, even like the psychological safety, and all of this, sometimes even above the kind of raw output. It's back to what you're saying about these are really like foundational. So maybe they're the enablers of the output. If this is in place, the output comes more naturally.
Totally. I totally agree. I mean, I think, I have some background in machine learning, and one concept which I find very interesting in machine learning is this idea of overfitting. When you're trying to optimize to a particular metric, like for example accuracy, you can what is very commonly known in the machine learning space is that you will optimize as you optimize towards accuracy, for example, your model gets better and better. But then after some time, if you optimize too much, it actually starts to get worse. And I love how kind of transferable that concept is to using metrics in other domains, like for example team performance. I think this is definitely the case. If you optimize too much towards one metric, you start to actually go off track, and you start to kind of overfit towards that metric. And I think to your point, I think that if you have this strong foundation, it gives you the foundation to optimize on a bunch of different metrics. And as long as you're careful not to optimize, not to overfit on one in particular, or even a few, as long as you have that foundation, you're actually in a really good place. Yeah.
And in teams, how do you balance individual versus team metrics without encouraging this kind of unhealthy competition or even undermining collaboration?
Yeah. I mean, I think I actually look at these as two different things. I think individual performance and team performance are separate in my view. I think that using metrics for individual performance is very, very hard and potentially dangerous. I mean, someone or a very easy thing to suggest is, you want to optimize for team performance. You're talking about software engineers. Why don't you track the lines of code? Why don't you track how many lines of code they write per sprint? And this is a very, very classic kind of false optimization. If you measure the lines of code, it actually will form very, very bad habits, and a developer would start writing code in the way that you just wouldn't want at all. And there's another example, right, of overfitting, where you're overfitting to one metric. So I think it's actually really important, especially with individuals. If you do use metrics, maybe you'll if you do use metrics, don't try to optimize those, but just try and use them as a flag, basically. So you're not using it, you're using it as an indicator rather than a goal. So I mean, for example, you shouldn't track, you shouldn't try and optimize for the lines of code that a developer writes. But if they're already writing one line of code a sprint, then you also have a problem, right? And so it's finding a middle ground there and saying, actually, what is a reasonable amount of code that a developer should write? And so I think for individual performance, it really comes down to setting expectations and defining your expectations. For a manager to define expectations clearly with their reports and saying, look, one key expectation is that you deliver code in your role as an IC. Maybe here's a lower bound for that, and here's an upper bound that I would say is a measure of success. Then for teams, I think it's slightly different. I think for teams, it's you kind of set expectations in defining a way of working. And in that case, you're kind of looking at performance indicators. Again, not goals, but performance indicators. And I think, then you start to think, well, actually, what are those performance indicators? What kind of indicators should I use?
And also, just to stay on the topic for a little bit more, what have you learned what not to do when rolling out these like performance frameworks? I think connected to this as well, it's about gaming the system, to put it one way, right? How do you ensure metrics are interpreted correctly, used constructively?
So I've learned a lot about what not to do. So I made for sure a lot of mistakes. So I think where do I start? I mean, the one I've talked about already, the obvious one is using metrics as a goal instead of using it as a performance indicator. I think this is a key mistake. This is a very obvious one that I've made, and I think a lot of others have also made. I think introducing teams to metrics in the wrong way. And so when I first started using metrics and using metrics as a way to understand how teams were performing, I brought them in to the team in quite a prescriptive way, as a tool for me to be able to report more easily to my stakeholders, basically. So the management. And what I realized, I think, over time, was that first of all, the metrics, the real value of metrics actually is to support teams in getting better. So if the metrics are not tied to some challenges that the teams have, then they're kind of it's just an additional kind of process that the managers for the teams need to deal with. The other thing is that you need to have goals in place as well. I think that if you don't have metrics without goals are kind of meaningless. You know, you can track, for example, you can track, let's say, the number of deployments you're doing per sprint. I think this is a really insightful metric, because it gives you an idea of how frequently the teams are deploying changes, and it gives you indicators to whether maybe there are challenges, maybe there's friction in the deploying process. And if you just say out of the blue, we want to track this, it kind of doesn't have any meaning for the teams. And I think you need to have some goal in mind. You have to say, you know, we know we have challenges about deployment. Perhaps we're having a backlog of pull requests which are waiting to be merged, and it would speed up the development process if we speed up the number of deployments per sprint, and then you have some objective around that, and then you're measuring. You have a metric to kind of measure your success according to that objective.
Yep.
So I think not having goals in place, this is a key kind of mistake that I made. What are the challenges? Yeah, I'd say probably those are the key ones. Yeah, the way that you introduce them, and then not having goals tied to them.
Yeah, no, I think it's hard for a team to kind of know what's expected of it if there's no kind of like end goal, essentially, or kind of to push themselves a little bit further if they're kind of, okay, we've reached this goal, what next? It's very, very hard without that target. But there's also a growing interest, and you could say concern, around this kind of AI driven productivity tracking. What's your take on this?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that the AI, what's going on in the AI space is affecting everything, and I think, of course, it's going to also affect the way that we measure performance. I think that the framing that I have for AI is that it's the first time where we've been able to really be able to process kind of soft knowledge or soft data with computers. Pre-AI, everything is hard. Computers deal in numbers or and they're discrete in the way that they process things. Whereas suddenly with AI, you can instruct a computer to do something with natural language, and it will reliably understand what you're saying. And I think in the context of measuring performance and looking at metrics, I think this is very interesting because so far all the mechanisms we have for measuring performance are based on hard numbers. How many pull requests does a team deliver in a sprint, or how many tickets did a team get through, how many bugs were there, etc. And now you can actually look at, for example, a developer experience survey. You can look at written text in a developer experience survey and actually get insights from that and quantify those insights on in an easy way. So I think being able to use AI to take kind of the soft knowledge, this natural language, these things that were previously difficult to quantify, and very easily start to quantify that data, and then create reports around that. I think this is for me the really interesting kind of where AI is really interesting in this space. And we actually started doing this at Plan A. We did regular quarterly developer experience surveys across functions. So for the front end function, back end function, data function, QA function, we would do a survey of what was working well in the developer experience, what wasn't working so well, what were areas where they thought that things could be improved. and then asking maybe specific questions about specific technologies or parts of the platform. And we started using AI towards the end of last year to summarize that and start to try to quantify that. And it was really, really helpful. And you start to see insights and patterns that you perhaps wouldn't have seen before.
Yeah, it's a really, really cool way of doing it, actually, because whilst you were talking here, I was thinking about this, how AI, whether it's, how far has it come in being able to help companies in terms of, engineer output or outcome, however you want to kind of define it. Because typically, if you were to do it quite like in the hard way, lines of code or kind of output, you're only kind of covering a very small part of the equation, when really what's affecting that engineer's ability to deliver is a lot more. It's like, okay, well, what's their role in the team? What's the composition of the team? What are they working on? How complex is the project? All of these softer aspects, right? That's very, very hard for you to kind of measure. And maybe AI is kind of, I'm not saying it's there at all. I'm just saying maybe AI can help in these aspects as well, because then you have a much clearer picture in terms of the outcome, not necessarily just the output, right?
Totally. Yeah, totally. I think there's so much scope here. Also in terms of, looking at the quality of the code that the engineers write. I mean, I think one challenge that a lot of companies have as they start to scale, I think, is maintaining quality in this period where the team is starting to grow and they're starting to really deliver a lot more code, but they don't have they perhaps don't have a management layer in place yet, or they don't have the processes in place yet to really ensure quality. And maybe there's also more pressure or a lot of pressure at that stage on the product side to deliver. And I think I think it's a challenge we went through. I know a number of other CTOs who went through similar challenges, and I think there's a lot of scope for AI to support in this sort of thing. AI can read code and AI can give feedback on code. For sure, AI is not the perfect software engineer. I have a friend who described AI coding as like having a super genius coder who's drunk, because it knows everything, but then it always makes, or it often makes these funny mistakes. But yeah, I mean, I think there's just so much scope for AI to be used in measuring performance on so many levels, and it's only going to get better. So I think it's a really interesting space.
Yeah, really exciting developments for sure. But to talk a little bit about team culture and inclusion as well, what have you seen as a real impact of diversity on team performance and problem solving as well?
Yeah, we were really keen from a very early stage at Plan A to have a diverse team. We were lucky that we, even at a very early stage, we had the diverse team, and I think we put effort into keeping that. Initially, I think largely because, I mean, first of all, our CEO was a woman, and this was we already had a diversity at a management level, which was really good. And also because of our mission, and I think everyone in the company when we were very small was strongly aligned with many kind of progressive social ideas, and one of them was diversity. And and then so we always put some effort into it. And what I found later, as we started to actually have multiple teams and multiple squads, was that I started to wonder if there was actually a clear benefit there. And I started to look at the performance of the teams, and very, very objectively, I can say that the teams that were more diverse, when I talk about diversity, I mean diversity at an IC level and also a management level. The teams that were more diverse performed better, and it was a small sample, but with our small sample, it was objectively true. And yeah, so I have a strong opinion now that more diverse teams do perform better. I don't have a really, really good reason why, and it's something that I'm generally interested in exploring. But I do have one hunch that when you have more diverse teams, when you have people from different diverse. I want to talk about diversity generally. When you have more diverse teams, I think that people put more effort into communicating, because you kind of need to. You have to communicate clearly, and a lot of the colloquialisms that you might have within your subset of your bubble don't really translate. And I think being forced to put that extra effort into communication can potentially make you think more and make people think more carefully about the way they communicate and make communication better within teams. So that's my hunch. But I'm sorry, I don't know. I'm still kind of figuring it out. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can agree. I think it's a really good or interesting perspective, actually, one I hadn't thought of myself. Yeah.
There's something about there's just something about the way the teams collaborated, and in the end, undeniably, the output of those teams when they were more diverse, they just worked better. It was really, really interesting. Maybe it's such a small sample size that actually I was, it doesn't actually work in other companies, but from my experience, it's a very important part of building teams.
And there's a big push from a lot of companies to for more diversity. So these are all kind of telling signs, right? And in terms of estimation and processes and everything like that, how did your teams approach work estimation? Did you have any methods that proved especially effective?
Yes,
because I can imagine in the age of AI as well, in the last couple of years, this kind of estimation has changed somewhat in terms of what can be done in a given space of time and to what quality.
Yeah, it comes back to the metrics topic. I mean, I think one of the things that we started measuring, as I said, one of the things we started measuring was basically sprint completion to sprint commit ratio. So how many tickets or story points did a team commit to versus how much did they actually complete at the end of the sprint. And what we found was that, and I think this is quite common in many teams, teams would commit to a large number of or a certain number of story points, and in general they wouldn't complete those story points. And they would come close. Sometimes they would on the off sprints they would actually complete more story points, but in general they were not very. It was rare that they would complete or go above the number of story points they committed. I talk about story points. I talk about number of tickets. Also, we started doing it in terms of sprint goals, like how did the team complete all the sprint goals. And this kicked up a lot of discussion about actually what is a story point. When you're estimating tickets, what does it mean to what does a story point actually mean? And I think a lot of teams also have this discussion. I think when people first start using Scrum, they think of story points in terms of time, and then you hear in the literature, you shouldn't think about story points in terms of time. It should be this abstract quantity. I thought a lot about this and tried lots of things, and in the end, my perspective now is really that story points are rather than a metric about time. It's an estimate of uncertainty. It's basically how certain or uncertain you about completing this piece of work, and it's actually helpful to think of it in terms of time. So you think of you can think of story points in terms of like a length of time. Is it going to take 3 days or 5 days or 8 days? Rather, I think it makes sense to think of it in terms of you have how likely is it that you will complete a task within 2 days? 1 being the most likely, and 3 being like pretty likely, and then 5 being kind of unlikely, and then 8 being there's no way. And I think that's actually a more interesting way to estimate. So instead of estimating based on the amount of work being set and then varying the time, rather try to set the amount of time and vary the amount of work. And then if you have too much work, so if you think that something's going to take longer than 2 or 3 days, then break it down and break it down into 2 tickets instead of 1. I guess the sort of journey through discussing metrics and setting up these metrics around, for example, how many story points can you get done in a sprint, then makes you think, well, actually, what are story points, and do they really make sense? And yeah, at least my thinking, my personal thinking now is that like story points are really a measure of uncertainty rather than a measure of time.
And I can imagine, I'm not sure what the setup was at Plan A, whether you were, the engineering teams were located in the same city or building or whatever it was, or whether people were working remotely. But I can imagine this estimation gets even trickier across remote teams, right? Did you guys work remotely at all, or?
We did, yeah. So we were fully remote. We had a lovely office in Berlin. We have a lovely office in Berlin. And I think probably roughly half the team was also based in Berlin. But we worked fully remote, so people would come into the office, I don't know, 2 or 3 times a week, and half the engineering team was in other parts of Europe. I mean, for us, I'm pretty pro having a remote culture. I think really it's about the processes and the framework that you have to enable that. I think that we definitely went through a period where it didn't work, but once you have things in place which support that, I think it can work really well. I mean, you need to make sure that you have regular retros. You need to make sure that you have some kind of social time within teams so that people get to know each other, and you get some kind of, people call it water cooler chat. And then I think it works with, and of course you need to make sure that you get the team together in a physical place regularly. We didn't do this enough, and I think that it's kind of a hidden cost as well of having a remote team. People think about remote teams as being potentially a huge cost potential to reduce costs, but forget that you do have some additional costs there, to make sure you get the team on site, for example, and to make sure you have the right tools in place.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think as we start to round off here, I'm interested to hear, what's on the horizon for you now that you've very recently left Plan A. What are you going to do next? What are you looking to do next? And what are you excited about in terms of in the technology field?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one core thing for me is that I'm still very aligned with wanting to have some impact on the climate, some positive impact on the climate, and I still want to do something in that space. I'm not sure what that is, and I think one of the learnings that I've had in the past years is that reporting is really, really important, and what Plan A is doing around reporting is super valuable. If a company doesn't understand what their emissions are now, how can they hope to reduce them? And the work that Plan A is also doing on decarbonization and supporting companies in reducing their emissions is obviously the most important thing. And with the data that they have, there are a lot of levers they can pull to actually support companies in reducing their emissions. At the same time, the corporate carbon accounting process is still very high level, and the data that you look at in this process is very high level and doesn't give you a lot of insight into actually ways that you can reduce. In some cases it does, and Plan A is really leveraging that. But actually,
Has
there are a
it
lot of
been? Sorry to interrupt. Has it been really? Have you had cases where it's been very kind of the companies have been? It's been very hard to get access to the data that you need. Essentially, it's restrictive,
Um,
particularly among these bigger companies, right?
yeah, actually, no. We've in general, it's been amazing how open that
Mm.
our customers have been to providing the data, but it's just very sometimes very challenging to use it. It's yeah. I mean the larger companies that they have very intense and detailed procurement processes. So one thing you learn when you're working with BMW or you're working with KFC or you're working with N26 is that they really go very deep into your processes and your technical setup before they let you start actually looking at their data.
Yeah.
But once they're satisfied with your setup, they're actually very open.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean the data really, what I think is going to be interesting in the longer term is, once we're able to decarbonize based on this very high level data, looking at the much lower level data and looking at actually the processes that are actually generating these emissions. So not just looking at how much electricity is a company using, how much fuel is a company using with their vehicles, but also when they're actually designing products. When you're designing a car, when you're designing a sofa. I'm looking at my sofa. What are the materials that you're using, and how can you select materials which have a lower footprint? What are the processes that you have when in manufacturing? How can you use more new technologies for manufacturing? And I think actually that's probably a space that I'm personally very interested in, is actually starting to look at this lower level, the kind of like the start of the value chain instead at the end.
Yeah, really, really well put. And more generally speaking, anything that's exciting, any technology trends that you're really excited about? We spoke obviously about AI, but it's a massive area at the moment. Is there anything in particular that you're excited about?
I mean, AI is the really obvious one, right? I think what else is really interesting at the moment? I think that there are certain trends which kick off kind of second order trends. One thing that I thought was interesting was, I mean, if you look at the smartphone, the development of smartphones, sensors became basically commoditized because of the development of the smartphone, and that enabled a whole bunch of other technologies like drones. And so I think there's probably going to be an interesting, basically, what are the technologies which are being commoditized because of AI, that are going to enable other technologies in the next years. So the obvious one is compute, right? GPUs. What are people going to start using GPUs for in the next 1 or 2 years beyond AI? What is that going to enable? I think edge computing is going to get really interesting. So starting to be able to run these like really big models actually on your phone or even in devices, to be able to do kind of, as I said, softer processing of data, and then green software. And I think that if you look at the software has grown so exponentially, and the energy cost of software has grown so exponentially, that we are undoubtedly really bloated in the way that we use energy for software. And I think that's going to get really, I hope that's going to get, that's going to be more work in that space in how can we actually use compute more efficiently. And this is obviously being done a lot where it's saving a lot of money, with training machine learning models, but, just day-to-day software, like on my computer, how can we make that more efficient? Yeah.
Fantastic. And before I wrap up here, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, just I guess thank you so much for having me. It's been really, really, really nice. And yeah. Thanks for all your great questions.
Yeah, no, well, thank you for joining us. It's been a really fascinating conversation. Really enjoyed it. I think we explored performance from pretty much every single angle, and just to hear your perspective as a tech leader, and particularly this kind of intersection of sustainability and engineering. So really interesting, and big thank you for joining us today.
Awesome, thanks so much.
Thanks. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your team. Until next time, keep building. We'll see you soon.